All right. Good evening, everyone. Jeremy and I we talked about doing this when I was away. I contacted Jeremy actually, and I don't know. I just had a very strong nudge. Let me put it that way to to do something like this on Grail Country. Um, so we're going to cover the lives of the saints. It's going to be an ongoing series, which I'm really excited about. And um, there's a couple of reasons for me personally why I want to do this. One of them is I want to learn. I I um I don't know much about the saints, and I know that Jeremy is more involved in his parish, and he has more knowledge of these things than I do. So that's one of them, and that's a very big reason for me. That's often why I want to participate in the things that are going on here at Grail Country. And then the other reason is because I just think it's the lives of the saints, the way I see it, they are extraordinary human beings who act in extraordinary ways under extraordinary circumstances, but they're not superhuman. They're just regular folks, really. That's how they started, right? And it's only through the power of God, of of Christ in their lives that they're able to live the that we hear about, that we end up hearing about.
Yeah.
Um, and in retrospect, happened in the world, in the United States particularly. Um, I think it would be a beautiful distraction to spend our time getting to know what it means to be a fool for Christ, um, someone who's willing to lay down their life for a friend, and yeah, and people who just walk and live in humility. So I think that would be beneficial for me, and for those who are able to join us in this endeavor. So of course, I'm having terrible internet again. So I'm probably going to end up shutting off my camera because that just doesn't cause a lag in our conversation. And if for some reason my internet decides to improve, I will turn my camera on again. But in the meanwhile, I'm going to just bid you all adieu from the screen. But I'm here, very much so, and participating. And like I said, I'll drop back in if my internet improves. I see it somewhat improving.
Yeah, it
Is
is. It's
is it,
getting a little
Jeremy?
better. Yeah. I can
It,
see your face better now.
at least that.
Yeah.
Okay, well, I'll shut up my camera off for now, and Jeremy's gonna share the saints that he chose for this episode. And yeah, I'm excited. Go ahead, Jeremy.
All right. Thanks. So I just wanted to add a couple of notes to what Shari said. One is the lives of the saints basically um, act as an example of the applied gospel. That's how my priest puts it. That they're showing us what the gospel looks like. And then the other thing I was going to mention is that I've picked saints from from the upcoming week, basically. So these are all saints that we will be venerating this week. I didn't pick all of them. There's many saints. We didn't have time for a lot, so I just tried to pick a few of the highlights, and I pray for their intervention as we go through this as well. So the first one I was going to talk about I was going to share her life, is Saint Marina. Marina was born in southern Anatolia, specifically from Pisidia in Antioch, at the end of the 3rd century during the reign of Claudius II in 268 to 270. She was the only daughter of noble pagan parents. When she was 5 years old, her mother died. Some sources say that she died shortly after childbirth. And since her father, Idesios, was too busy carrying out his duties as a pagan priest to care for her properly, he turned her care over to a woman who happened to be a Christian. This nanny lived in a small town about 15 miles from where Marina was born. Away from her father's idols and blasphemous practices, her nanny taught her about the Christian faith. As Marina increased in age, more so did she advance in knowledge, understanding, and compassion. Her faith in the living God was so great that she desired the difficult path of martyrdom. She told her father that she wished to become a Christian and to never marry so as to live a life of virginity. Her father despised her for her faith and disowned her as his daughter. A new governor named Olimbrios was elected for the region and in time began a persecution against all Christians in the area. One day he caught a glimpse of the very beautiful 15-year-old Marina with her nanny. The emperor governor Olimbrios, seeing her great beauty, desired her for his wife. When asked her name, homeland, and faith, Marina answered, "My name is Marina. I am the offspring of Pisidia. I call upon the name of my Lord Jesus Christ." Upon learning that she was a Christian, Olimbrios tried to dissuade her by flatteries and by threats of torture. Marina frankly replied to the man, "Have no vain hope for me, O governor, that I might cower before any number of torments. Nothing will separate me from Christ, neither affliction, famine, fire, sword, nor any other harsh tribulation, not even a violent and very painful death. Think not that you will entice me with honors, gold, or other wealth, because all these things are perishable and temporal. The soul, by the grace of God, is immortal and desires eternity. For this reason, we, the Christians, wisely disdain these fleeting luxuries and enjoyments. We endure the sorrow and distress of the day, that we might attain to everlasting life and eternal rest after our repose. If you think that I lie, here I am. Try me, so you will know by deed the truth. Strike me, slay me, burn me, suffocate, or test me with 10,000 torments. As much as you will worsen the punishment, so much more will Christ glorify me in the future life and blessedness. Many times in this life, Christ grants us a small consolation as a pledge of that future exaltation. He draws us out of the depths of the sea, or rescues us from fire, or saves us from other torments, to your shame and condemnation. Therefore, I do not sorrow in this transient life. Readily I give my body to death for my deathless God and Master, as the sinless one, out of love for me, was crucified. This rejection infuriated the governor, and he put her to harsh torture, so that all the beauty of her body was disfigured. Not only the public sorrowed and wept and suffered due to her troubles, but even the governor himself, unable to bear the horrors of these tortures, hid his face in his hands. As broken up and destroyed as her body was, more so was her soul renewed and brighter. Unshaken, she prayed with thanksgiving that the Lord count her worthy to be tormented for his love. As they tortured her, the saint was looking up to heaven and prayed, "To you, O Lord, I lift up my soul. O my God, I trust in you. Let me not be ashamed. Let not my enemies triumph over me. Indeed, let no one who waits on you be ashamed. Let those be ashamed who deal treacherously without cause. Show me your ways, O Lord. Teach me your paths. Lead me in your truth and teach me, for you are the God of my salvation. On you I wait all day. Remember, O Lord, your tender mercies and your loving kindness, for they have been from of old. For I withstand these pains because I confess your holy name. Send your mercy and compassion to me, so my grief will become joy." As the saint was chanting and praising the Lord, the soldiers were beating her so severely that her flesh was torn and her blood flew profusely. The archangel Michael then appeared to her and said to her, "Great is your faith, Marina. Have more strength, for it is by your good confession that your soul will survive and you will gain the holy baptism." The ruler ordered that Marina be thrown in prison. While she prayed there, the archangel Michael again came to comfort her and healed her of all her wounds. Seeing this, the governor was amazed. He told her that he was sure then that she was a great magician. She said, "I am not a magician, but I am a worshiper of Jesus Christ. Now your defiled, helpless idols have been exposed." The ruler was enraged. He ordered to saw her flesh with iron saws and to cut her skin with knives. When he thought that she was dead, he ordered his soldiers to put her body back in prison until she rotted. Archangel Michael appeared to her again, strengthened her, and repeated what he said to her before. He then crossed her, cured her, and disappeared. A malicious demon, beholding that his servant Olymbrios could not vanquish one young woman and make her fall down before the idols of demons, became desperate and wished to test her himself. Taking on a dark and dragon-like guise, a demon appeared to Marina in the prison to frighten her. Fearlessly, Christ's athlete seized him by the hair and, finding a hammer, beat him to the ground, completely humbling him. A great light appeared and illuminated the entire prison. All of Marina's wounds were completely healed, and not even a trace of scarring remained on her body. It is for this reason that Saint Marina often holds a hammer and is sometimes depicted beating a demon in her icons. The demented governor tortured her the next day by fire and water, but Marina endured it all as if not in her own body. The ruler gave his orders to tie her to a pole and burn her. They did. Then he ordered that they tie her hands and legs and put her in boiling water. When she was in the water, Saint Marina looked up to heaven and said, "O God who dwells in heaven, I ask you to untie me and to make this water a baptism for me. Dress me with the robe of salvation through it. Take away from me the old man and put on me the new man. Make me with this baptism worthy to inherit the life eternal and make my faith steadfast." A great earthquake then shook the place. Marina's ties were loosened, and she immersed herself in the water 3 times in the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. She came out of the water praising God. A voice came from heaven, and all the people who were gathered there heard it. The voice said, "You are blessed, Marina. You were baptized and became worthy of the crown of virginity." Many of those who witnessed these events declared their faith, became Christians, and were baptized. The ruler ordered all of them to be killed. They were beheaded and gained the wreath of martyrdom. It is estimated that they numbered in the thousands. Seeing that he could not overcome the saint, the wicked governor finally sentenced Marina to death by beheading. She was beheaded at the age of 15 in the time of Diocletian, but is numbered with the armies of martyrs and remains alive in soul and power in heaven and on earth. The sufferings of the great martyr Marina were described by an eyewitness of the event named Theodomos. Up until the taking of Constantinople by the Western Crusaders in the year 1204, the relics of great martyr Marina were in the Pantopontia monastery. According to other sources, they were located in Antioch until 908, and from there transferred to Italy. Now they are in Athens in a church dedicated to the Holy Virgin Martyr. Her venerable right hand was transferred to Mount Athos to the Vadopedi monastery. However, atop Mount Lanya in Albania, overlooking Lake Ohrid, there is a monastery dedicated to Saint Marina with a portion of her miraculous relics. Countless miracles have occurred and still occur in this monastery, whose witnesses are not only Christians but many Muslims as well. So much did the Turks have respect for this holy place that they never dared disturb either this holy place or the property of this monastery. At one time, a Turk was the guardian of the monastery. Saint Marina is especially invoked for deliverance from demonic possession and cures innumerable diseases, including cancer. Okay, ready for next saint? I guess we are. I'll go ahead.
Wait a minute. Sorry, I have my mic muted.
Oh, yeah, okay.
and I had to wait for my internet to catch up when I shut my camera off. Um, so there's an aspect to these stories that have a mythological feel to them when I hear them or when I read them. Do I have that right?
Yeah, there's definitely patterns being revealed. They the study of the saints are called the hagiography, and it's like the wisdom. I believe it's I think hagia I think no how I can't remember what it means. I can't remember what it translates for, but yeah, there's definitely, especially the older you go back, right? This is from the early fourth century, late third century, early fourth century, and so yeah, there's definitely more of mythical element to it, where it's definitely revealing patterns that you'll see in other lives of the saints as well.
Right. Yeah, in the definition I just looked up, it's, the biography of saints, and then the second meaning is an idealizing biography, right?
Yes. Yeah. Yes.
So,
Yeah.
yeah, and what's interesting to me about that is, like you said, it's revealing patterns,
Mhm.
and it's also it doesn't take away from there I don't know, like I said, I'm not the expert on these things, but it doesn't take away from anything to have that, um, kind of mythological flair to it. It
Yeah.
adds,
Well,
in my opinion.
yeah, I agree. I kind of look at it like the Star Spangled Banner, where there was Francis Scott Key is laying in a ship during the War of 1812, and I'm sure there were newspaper articles written about it. I'm sure there
Right,
people wrote about it in their journals and their diaries. But what we remember is the Star Spangled Banner, and what we stand up and sing together is a poem about what happened. And so it was inspired by those events that happened, but it has a greater beauty. It carries a greater beauty than just tied directly to the events themselves. That's the way I look at it.
right, right.
It's like a unifying beauty that
Yeah,
brings more
it's
meaning
almost
to
the
it.
difference be right, yeah. It's the difference between like a like a news report and a fairy tale.
Yes. Yep. Okay, ready for next one?
Yep,
Okay. Let's do I'm gonna this so another person we're venerating this week is Saint Mary Magdalene, and uh her title, she has a title. Hold on, let me pull it up. Myrrh bearer and equal of the apostles, Mary Magdalene. And she's called that because she was one of the early ones or the first one that Christ appeared to at the tomb. And and so she was the one who brought the message to the other apostles that Christ had risen. So she is also considered, that's why she's equal to the apostles. She's a messenger of his good news as well. Let's see. So so the first part of her life that we have here, that I have here, is basically just a retelling of the gospel accounts. It's kind of a compilation of the gospel accounts, and just in the interest of time, I'm not going to go over that because you all have access to that in the scriptures. I thought for this introduction it would be interesting. I was hoping it would be interesting to you to hear the traditions that have been preserved that are not in the scriptures about her life. So I'll start right after she went back to the apostles, where she said, "I've seen the Lord," and this was the first preaching in the world about the resurrection. The gospels proclaimed the glad tidings to the world, but she proclaimed it to the apostles themselves. Holy Scripture does not tell us about the life of Mary Magdalene after the resurrection of Christ, but it is impossible to doubt that if in the terrifying minutes of Christ's crucifixion she was at the foot of his cross, with his all pure mother and St. John, that she must have stayed with them during the happier time after the resurrection and ascension of Christ. Thus, in the Acts of the Apostles, St. Luke writes that all the apostles with one mind stayed in prayer and supplication with certain women and Mary, the mother of Jesus, and his brethren. Holy tradition testifies that when the apostles departed from Jerusalem to preach to all the ends of the earth, then Mary Magdalene also went with them. A daring woman whose heart was full of reminiscence of the resurrection, she went beyond her native borders and went to preach in pagan Rome. Everywhere she proclaimed to people about Christ and his teaching. When many did not believe that Christ is risen, she repeated to them what she had said to the apostles on the radiant morning of the resurrection. I have seen the Lord. With this message, she went all over Italy. Tradition relates that in Italy, Mary Magdalene visited Emperor Tiberius and proclaimed to him Christ's resurrection. According to tradition, she brought him a red egg as a symbol of the resurrection, a symbol of new life, with the words, Christ is risen. Then she told the emperor that in his province of Judea, the unjustly condemned Jesus, the Galilean, a holy man, a miracle worker, powerful before God and all mankind, had been executed at the instigation of the Jewish high priests, and the sentence confirmed by the procurator appointed by Tiberius Pontius Pilate. Mary repeated the words of the gospel, of the apostles, that we are redeemed from the vanity of life, not with perishable silver or gold, but rather by the precious blood of Christ. Thanks to Mary Magdalene, the custom to give each other paschal eggs on the day of the radiant resurrection of Christ spread among Christians over all the world. In one ancient Greek manuscript written on parchment, kept in the monastery library of St. Athanasius near Thessalonica, is a prayer read on the day of Holy Pascha for the blessing of eggs and cheese. In it is indicated that the igumen, in passing out the blessed egg, says to the brethren, Thus have we received from the Holy Fathers who preserved this custom from the very time of the holy apostles. Therefore, the holy equal of the apostles, Mary Magdalene, first showed believers the example of this joyful offering. Mary Magdalene continued her preaching in Italy and in the city of Rome itself. Evidently, the Apostle Paul has her in mind in his epistle to the Romans, where together with other ascetics of evangelical preaching, he mentions Mary, who, as he expresses, has bestowed much labor on us. Evidently, she extensively served the church in its means of subsistence and its difficulties, being exposed to dangers and sharing with the apostles the labors of preaching. According to church tradition, she remained in Rome until the arrival of the apostle Paul, and for 2 more years following his departure from Rome after the first court judgment upon him. From Rome, St. Mary Magdalene, already bent with age, moved to Ephesus, where the holy apostle John unceasingly labored. There the saint finished her earthly life and was buried. Her holy relics were transferred in the 9th century to Constantinople and placed in the monastery church of St. Lazarus. In the era of the Crusader campaigns, they were transferred to Italy and placed at Rome under the altar of the Lateran Cathedral. Part of the relics of Mary Magdalene are said to be in Provence, France, near Marseille, where over them, at the foot of a steep mountain, a splendid church is built in her honor. The Orthodox Church honors the holy memory of St. Mary Magdalene, the woman called by the Lord himself from darkness to light and from the power of Satan to God. Formerly immersed in sin and having received healing, she sincerely and irrevocably began a new life and never wavered from that path. Mary loved the Lord who called her to a new life. She was faithful to him not only when he was surrounded by enthusiastic crowds and winning recognition as a miracle worker, but also when all the disciples deserted him in fear, and he, humiliated and crucified, hung in torment upon the cross. This is why the Lord, knowing her faithfulness, appeared to her first and esteemed her worthy to be first to proclaim his resurrection.
Yeah, it's interesting. Can you hear me okay, or am I
Yeah,
lagging?
yeah. No, you're much clearer now. It's the best it's sounded all night.
I'm definitely lagging, though. It took you a few minutes to hear me.
Oh,
Um,
sorry.
so there's a number of other legends around Mary Magdalene, especially in Celtic Christianity too,
Mhm.
right? I don't know if you've
I
heard of
I'm
them. Have you heard of them, Jeremy?
no, I'm not as familiar with that. No.
Mm. There's the idea that Mary Magdalene is actually the Holy Grail. There's a connection to the Holy Land and England through the Holy Grail, like that story. And I'm not a I don't know. I haven't even read the Holy Grail, and I'm from girl country, but whatever.
There is that book.
um,
There's a book called Holy Blood, Holy
there's
Grail.
the legend that Joseph, yeah, and then there's a legend that Joseph of Arimathea went to England and brought the Holy Grail there, and he went there to preach the gospel. And in some of the stories, I believe, don't quote me on this, but in some of the stories, Mary Magdalene was with him, I think.
Mm, yeah.
But anyway,
I have heard that
I'm
now that you mention it.
yeah, I don't know enough about it to say more than that. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. I
Well,
will
yeah, go.
oh,
Yeah.
yeah. Next I had Saint Simeon, the Fool for Christ. And I will pull that up. Venerable Simeon of and by the way, I want to apologize for my pronunciation. If you're a native speaker of any of these languages or places, please forgive me. I'm just a farm boy from Utah. So I do my best. But I am definitely an English speaker only. So Venerable Simeon of Emesa, the Fool for Christ, and his fellow ascetic Venerable John. The monks Simeon, Fool for Christ, and his fellow ascetic John were Syrians, and they lived in the 6th century at the city of Edessa. From childhood, they were bound by close ties of friendship. The older of them, Simeon, was unmarried and lived with his aged mother. John, however, although he was married, lived with his father, his mother was dead, and with his young wife. Both friends belonged to wealthy families. When Simeon was 30 years old and John 24, they made a pilgrimage to Jerusalem on the feast of the exaltation of the venerable and life-creating cross of the Lord. On the journey home, the friends spoke of the soul's path to salvation. Dismounting their horses, they sent the servants on ahead with the horses while they continued on foot. Passing through Jordan, they saw monasteries on the edge of the desert. Both of them were filled with an irrepressible desire to leave the world and spend their remaining life in monastic struggles. They turned off from the road, which their servants followed to Syria, and they prayed zealously that God would guide them to the monasteries on the opposite side. They besought the Lord to indicate which monastery they should choose, and they decided to enter whichever monastery had its gates open. At this time, the Lord informed Igumen Nikon in a dream to open the monastery gates so that the sheep of Christ could enter in. I think that's abbot. Igumen, yeah, is another word for abbot. In great joy, the comrades came through the open gates of the monastery, where they were warmly welcomed by the igumen, and they remained at the monastery. In a short while, they received the monastic tonsure. After remaining at the monastery for a certain time, Simeon desired to intensify his efforts and to go into the desert to pursue asceticism in complete solitude. John did not wish to be left behind by his companion, and he decided to share with him the work of a desert dweller. The Lord revealed the intentions of the companions to Igumen Nikon, and on that night, when Saint Simeon and John intended to depart the monastery, he himself opened the gates for them. He prayed with them, gave them his blessing, and sent them into the wilderness. When they began their life in the desert, the spiritual brothers at first experienced the strong assaults of the devil. They were tempted by grief over abandoning their families, and the demons tried to discourage the ascetics, subjecting them to weakness, despondency, and idleness. The brothers Simeon and John remembered their monastic calling, and trusting in the prayers of their elder Nikon, they continued upon their chosen path. They spent their time in unceasing prayer and strict fasting, encouraging one another in their struggle against temptation. After a while, with God's help, the temptation stopped. The monks were told by God that Simeon's mother and John's wife had died, and that the Lord had vouchsafed them to the blessings of paradise. After this, Simeon and John lived in the desert for 29 years, and they attained complete dispassion and a high degree of spirituality. Saint Simeon, through the inspiration of God, considered that now it was proper for him to serve people. To do this, he must leave the desert solitude and go into the world. St. John, however, believing that he had not attained such a degree of dispassion as his companion, decided not to leave the wilderness. The brethren parted with tears. Simeon journeyed to Jerusalem, and there he venerated the tomb of the Lord and all the holy places. By his great humility, the holy ascetic entreated the Lord to permit him to serve his neighbor in such a way that they should not acknowledge him. Saint Simeon chose for himself the difficult task of foolishness for Christ. Having come to the city of Emesa, he stayed there and passed himself off as a simpleton, behaving strangely, for which he was subjected to insults, abuse, and beatings. In spite of this, he accomplished many good deeds. He cast out demons, healed the sick, delivered people from imminent death, brought the unbelieving to faith, and sinners to repentance. All these things he did under the guise of foolishness, and he never received praise or thanks from people. St. John highly esteemed his spiritual brother, however. When one of the inhabitants of the city of Emesa visited him in the wilderness, asking for his advice and prayers, he would invariably direct them to the fool Simeon, who was better able to offer them spiritual counsel. For 3 days before his death, Saint Simeon ceased to appear on the streets, and he enclosed himself in his hut, where there was nothing except for bundles of firewood. Having remained in unceasing prayer for 3 days, Saint Simeon fell asleep in the Lord. Some of the city poor, his companions, had not seen the fool for some time. They went to his hut and found him dead. Taking up the dead body, they carried him without church singing to a place where the homeless and strangers were buried. While they carried the body of Saint Simeon, several of the inhabitants heard a wondrous church singing, but could not understand from whence it came. After Saint Simeon died, Saint John also fell asleep in the Lord. Shortly before his death, Saint Simeon saw a vision of his spiritual brother wearing a crown upon his head with the inscription, "For endurance in the desert." There's a longer book of the life of Saint Simeon, and it's one of my favorites. And in there, my favorite story about Saint Simeon is that when he did first come to Emesa, the first thing he did was he found a dead dog out in the garbage pile outside of the city, and he put a leash on it, and he walked into the city and pretended like the dog was alive, and he kept the dog until like there was nothing left of the dog, and it just fell apart, and then there was only a leash, and then he continued carrying the leash around for a while, acting like he had a dog. And that was just one of the examples of the fool for Christ stuff that he did, but I always like that story. And do we want one more, or are we good? You're the boss, Shari.
I think that's good, actually.
Okay.
Yeah, I think that's good to for those who have just joined or whatever, my internet is just terrible. And I need to change it at some point. But anyway, I'm going to put a link in the chat, and then if anybody wants to drop in and just talk about these things with us. Did you have any thoughts, Jeremy?
No, I'm really excited about this project. I'm excited to just share these stories with people who haven't heard them. I had never heard them. I grew up Mormon, and so I wasn't exposed to these kinds of the history of the church. I wasn't exposed to the lives of these people when I was growing up, and so I've only been introduced to it in the last 4 years, and I just love it. For about a year and a half, my wife and I were commuting together, and we would listen to recordings of the lives of the saints on our commute, and it really transformed. Well, it transformed our
Right.
mornings because we didn't fight anymore, and it transformed your whole day because you're starting out listening to these really inspiring stories. So it was great.
right.
But so I'm excited to
Yeah.
share it with people who haven't
So
heard.
I'm gonna yeah. So in the Orthodox Church, it's been my experience that, like as a catechumen and then later as an Orthodox Christian baptized into the church, one of the things that I was always encouraged to do was read the lives of the saints. That was something that the priests, both priests that I had, they would much rather see me reading the lives of the saints than reading theology books, right?
Yes.
And so I'm gonna ask you, Jeremy, since you're the representative, um, why do you think that is? Why do you think that they want people to read the lives of the saints?
Well, I'll mainly speak for myself. I'm definitely not a representative of the church. I'm not a priest, but I will tell you that my priest definitely encouraged me to do that. And the reason he told me was that the theology, the language is difficult, the concepts are difficult, it's very abstract, it's very propositional. It's very, it just takes a lot of time to get acquainted with the with the rhythms of the church before you can really start to even understand what they're talking about. And especially for me coming from Mormonism, because the theology was so different. And so my priest just said the nice thing about the lives of the saints is that this is the applied gospel. This is what the gospel looks like in the life of someone who has completely devoted their heart and their body and their mind to Christ. And this is what it looks like. This is the applied gospel. And so it's better to see it and to learn how it manifests in the world than it is to learn an abstract wall chart of concepts. That was his
Right,
that was his
right.
his
And
advice.
so this would be like in the 4 Ps of, John Vervaeke's 4 Ps, this would be the participatory part, right? The
Yes. Yeah.
participatory knowing. And so then you end up learning what it means. And so what's super interesting to me about this is that they're not they're not all, doing the same thing. They're all incredibly different, right? Each one of them. Like,
Yeah.
we just heard 3 stories, um, of 3 different people, and I don't think that you could draw any, propositional systematic conclusions about what it means to be a saint.
Right. Yeah, I think that's part of the beauty of seeing the lives of the saints as well, is that you see that God works with you personally, right? He transforms you. He's not trying to turn you into a mold, or he's not trying to turn you into a particular shape that's the same as everyone else's shape. He works with you.
Right,
Your relationship with God is unique, and he works with you in your life and your time frame and the time that you live in and the culture you live in and the people you live around. And that's what God works with. And he's patient, and he's capable of working with any of us. Right. So
right. And this just comes to mind now. So there is even in the Hebrew scriptures, there is a definitely a lives of the saints, right? Like all of our heroes from the scriptures, David and Samuel and King Saul and Samson and, and I mean many, many, many more, right?
yeah.
It it's also very much, it seems to me anyway, um, a Lives of the Saints book, right? The
Yeah,
Hebrew
I
script.
would agree with that. Yeah, the Orthodox view, and uh forgive me, my Jewish brothers, but the Orthodox view on the purpose of the Old Testament is to reveal to us the genealogy of the Theotokos. It's to show us what the people were like who God set apart to eventually give us the Theotokos through which Christ was born. Right. So that's exactly right. What you're
Yeah,
saying, like the whole thing is the story of the lives of the the ancestors of Christ. And so that the tradition just continued on after Christ, where those who were dedicated to him and followed him continued to, those stories were collected by the people who loved them and were preserved and carried down to this day. You know, there are books going in monasteries that go back to the 2nd, 3rd century.
Yeah, that's something thought maybe you could expand on a little bit, Jeremy, is the history of writing down these stories, like where they came from, how far back that goes,
As,
and that.
yeah, as far as I know, they were preserved in monasteries, and they the earliest ones we have are around the 3rd century AD. I could be wrong, and please correct me if I am. But as far as I know, that's like the earliest ones are 2nd, 3rd century, um, right around the end of the 2nd century, and they were just copied over and over again. So when a codex would start to deteriorate, another monk would just recopy them. But like there are like the monastery at Mount Sinai is one of the oldest monasteries, and they have the oldest icon as well, or excuse me, one of the oldest icons. It's the Panteleimon of Christ, and well, it's the earliest example of it that we have, and that one dates back to the 3rd century AD,
Okay.
and so they've preserved those records. And then Mount Athos they have documents, original documents going back to the 3rd century as well.
Right.
So it was always, I mean, Saint Stephen is the proto martyr, and he's right in the book of Acts. He's
Right.
basically the first martyr, and so those stories were collected from the very beginning. I mean, the book of Acts is the first, lives of the saints after
True.
Christ.
Yeah, that's right. And what about the canonization in the church? Like how do these people become saints within the church itself? Although we must also say, and you told me this because I unfortunately don't have a liturgy to attend, but there is there is that what was it called, Jeremy? The All Saints
Oh, the
Day.
Synaxarion of All Saints. Yeah, we actually have 2 of them during the year. It's a day where we commemorate all saints, both the known saints and the unknown saints.
And the
And
unknown.
yeah, and that's made clear in the hymnology, in the hymns of those days, that most of the saints, we don't know their names. And there's the ones who died in prisons, the ones who died in the arenas, the ones who died in the wilderness, the ones who died just living their everyday lives. We don't know most of the lives of the saints. It's that there are certain people who it's clear to the people who are around them, and then also like the accounts of the martyrs. It was clear to the people around them that this was something special. And then, if you're martyred for the faith, that's automatic sainthood. That's automatic crown.
Yeah.
They still, even when that happens, like we've had a couple of people recently who have been martyred, and even when that happens, they still take their time. It generally takes at least 10 years after the person is in repose before they're considered for canonization. And
Right.
during that time, they're collecting the stories of that person's life. If there are miracle stories, they're gathering those, and it's usually a spiritual child of the person who is in repose, or several of them, who will go and interview people and get letters and review the letters, and review the journal of the person if they had one, and collect their life. And we have example, like an example I'm thinking of is Saint Silouan. His life was written by Saint Sophrony, and while Saint Silouan was alive, hardly anyone knew that he was how spiritually advanced he was. But Saint Sophrony knew, and when he passed, Saint Sophrony went through his journal and his writings, and got and because he was his spiritual son, he gathered all these stories. And this was in the 1900s that this happened.
Right. Yeah.
So there are recent saints. This still happens, and the other thing I think is really unique that I wanted to mention is that when you read a book that's the life of a saint, so like the Saint Silouan book, the first half of the book or so is the life. It's like the account of the life of the saint, where they lived, what they
Yeah.
did, and what their struggles were, and their sicknesses, and what their blessings were, and miracle stories, and all that stuff is collected. And then the second half of the book is their actual teachings. And when I first came to Orthodoxy, I was a little frustrated by that because I wanted the meat, I just wanted to jump right
Yeah.
in. And my priest was like, no, this is incarnational. You can't, what they teach you doesn't mean anything unless you know who they are. So you need to
Right.
learn about them first, and then their teachings will have context and mean more weight because you understand the context of the teachings.
Right.
So,
And then the canonization process, is there a criteria or
that's
outside
I
of
don't I
martyrdom?
don't know a lot of the details. The way I understand is they gather these stories. There is a 10-year process, and it's just to make sure that nothing scandalous that was unknown becomes known. That's the main concern, I think, and then also making sure that the stories are genuine. And so they gathered the stories, they give them to the bishop of the area, that was over that particular person, that person's bishop, and the bishop then reviews it, interviews the people himself, and prays. Of course, the prayer is always a part of it. And then, as far as I know, I think it goes to like a synod, or like to the patriarchate, and the patriarch then will review all of this and pray, and then they officially announce that this person's canonized.
Right.
Now, that being said, we have many people who have not been officially canonized yet, who are still venerated. People start making icons of them. They call them, blessed, like Blessed Seraphim Rose, or Blessed um, Matushka Olga. Before she was canonized, she was, many people had icons of her, venerating her,
Mhm.
going as if, and that's kind of how it works in the Orthodox Church, is that it's actually it's a bottom up
Yeah. Yeah, it's kind of a
awareness.
grassroots.
It is,
Yeah, we
yeah,
talked about that earlier, you and I, that, that it is a bottom-up thing, right? So these people are put forward by the laity,
yes,
not by the church, because
that's right.
they're known within their communities and within their parishes.
Yes,
So, yeah. Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So,
I'm gonna try turning on my camera now. Hang on a second. Hopefully this works. Okay, we'll see how it goes.
oh, it's
So,
not bad. Yeah, it's not bad.
see, my cohabitant is not in the house on his iPad at the moment. But, yeah, does anybody have any questions or, wanna jump in and talk about any of this, or even just, like, something that's, you know, tangentially connected, that thoughts that they might have or anything like that? Um, yeah, please, I will
Yeah, and
put it
I'm
in.
not super educated. I do the best I can. I know enough to know that I don't know much, but
Well, I'm not at all.
I'll share what I know.
I'm doing what I do best. I'm just, flying by the seat of my pants and,
Mhm.
hanging on the coattails of people that know more than I do.
Yeah. Well, again, I just want to thank you for the opportunity. I'm really, really looking forward to this series. I think
I am too.
it's good for me to get reconnected to the calendar of the lives of the saints. And I should mention, we venerate them on the day that they went in repose. So the day they died, that's
Is
the
the
day that
day.
that's the day we commemorate them. Generally, I mean, there are exceptions, and then there are some that we don't know what day they died, and so they pick a day, and kind of just assign them a day. But when we know the day they died, that's the day we venerate them.
Right. And maybe you could, give us an idea, or those watching, how you would define veneration, because I know for a lot of people that's always a question, right? Like, what is veneration? Is it worship? Is it idol
Mm,
worship? There's a lot of misgivings about that. And
yeah,
have you
Can I
guys?
ask a question connected with that? Because
Yeah,
sure.
I respect you guys, and I'm not Orthodox, and
You should stop doing that.
yeah, I am troubled by the images. Um,
Mm,
that's I grew up very, very old school Catholic,
mm,
um, where I'll give an example of a story, which is so I'm Maltese, and in Malta there's one of the biggest, the town that my dad is from. They do this thing called the Feast of Santa Maria, and they have a life-size statue of Mary. And as they're bringing it over, this statue is covered, like it's painted, it's beautiful. It also has a crown, and then it has like jewelry on it. And my mom tells me that in the 80s, my uncle Peter got in a terrible car accident. Drunk driver got on a highway going the wrong way, hit him head on, and they didn't know if he was going to survive. And my Nana prayed to Mary and said that if she healed my uncle, that she would buy that statue a gold ring. And that statue to this day wears a gold ring, and that's what the jewelry is. It's supposed to be prayers which were answered. So my question to you is there, I know that this is slightly different because the Orthodox specifically are like no statues, if I'm correct.
Generally, yeah. We can have them in the narthex, but not in the sanctuary.
Okay. Can someone break the second commandment, depending on how we number them? Can someone break that with how they use icons? That's my question. And I'm interested in your response. I'm not trying to fight you.
Okay.
No. David, could you just give us the second commandment in full? I'm sure you have it memorized.
Oh, it's just the notion of making images, right? And I would also say that you will have no other Elohim besides me. Elohim includes angels and the dead. Those are both referred to as Elohim within the Hebrew scriptures. So the spirit of Saul coming up, it says, I see an Elohim, which is like gods. I see an Elohim coming up, or the angel that's in the fire with them, which may be Christ. I see an Elohim. One is the son of the Elohim. So it feels like it could, that commandment, not having others that we're worshiping, and not making images. Your thoughts?
Yeah. So there's I'll back into the answer, because I do want to say that in the Greek tradition, especially, you see people, like if you go to a monastery, there's watches and jewelry and necklaces on the icons. And it is when they have prayed to that saint and the saint answered their prayer, they offer a gift. I've also heard of people who will go to the monastery, and like there was a woman who was trying to get pregnant, couldn't get pregnant, and she and her husband went to the monastery, and they crawled from the parking lot into the monastery and to the chapel for a particular saint who helps people who are trying to conceive. And they crawled there, on their hands and knees and in the sand and in the rocks. And it's a way of showing their dedication and showing their hope. And so that's definitely alive in
Greek Orthodoxy,
in different traditions of Orthodoxy, for sure. And the way that it was explained to me comes from the Seventh Ecumenical Council, which is when the veneration of icons was re-established and forever integrated into the church. There was controversy over it for centuries. There were iconoclastic emperors. There was all kinds of bloodshed. Many monasteries, like, we don't have a lot of icons. We don't have very many early icons left. The one we have that was at Mount Sinai was just so far removed, so far away, and in the middle of the desert, that no one went to the trouble of going out there to destroy the icons. But yeah, during the iconoclasm movement, there was a lot of destruction of early icons, which is why we don't have a lot of early ones. But the explanation that's given in the Seventh Ecumenical Council is that Christ himself became the image of God. He entered into creation. He entered into our world. And because he entered into the world, then we can make icons, because he is an icon. He's an icon of God. to us in his life. And so then they make pictures of him because he himself entered in. So he was a fulfillment of the second commandment because he came and condescended to us so that we could see the gospel in the world. We could see God in the world and how God moves.
What about
that.
icons of angels? Because he didn't take on angels.
No, he didn't, but he revealed heaven to us. And so we feel that he broke, like this is related to the veil ripping in the temple when he was crucified. And so that veil was open to us.
Mm-hmm.
And so we were, so the Orthodox view is that basically all of creation kind of, for lack of a better way of saying it, moved up a level, like it was elevated and healed by the resurrection of Christ. And so before, where the Holy of Holies, the high priest would only go into the Holy of Holies once a year, and they would tie a rope around his leg.
Right.
And he had bells, so that if they stopped hearing the bells, they would pull on the rope because they assumed he died because he had entered the Holy of Holies unworthily. After the resurrection of Christ, basically all of creation went up a level, and now the Holy of Holies is where the altar is in our church, and our priest can go in and out of it, every divine liturgy, right? So basically we were elevated up so that we can participate in that. The icons that are in our churches are the cloud of angels from the book of Revelation.
Just to make sure, though, but laity cannot go where the priest goes. Still,
you have to be blessed by the priest to be able to go back there. So there are men and boys that will go back and serve in the altar.
So you are able to.
You can't enter there without a blessing from the priest.
Okay.
And women do not enter the altar, just men.
Do you know what happened to the bronze serpent? You know where
Wait, can I just say something before you guys move on to question number 2? Okay, so this moving up a level thing, I would add, and I'm definitely not speaking as an Orthodox representative or a representative of the Orthodox Church, but
and me neither, by the way. Just for clarity.
So these are just things that I've discovered, over the years, that, in Revelation, it talks about the lamb that is slain at the foundation of the world, right? Or which is like the creation, right? The foundation is when the world was created. So when was that? That would have been at the cross. Okay.
Right.
And so that is why the cosmos, quote unquote, moves up a level. It's actually when creation happens, right? I remember, I'm not sure now if it was Father John Bear or somebody else talked about the story of Jesus healing the blind man, the man born blind. And one of the Orthodox interpretations of that story is that the reason he used the mud and the spit was because it was an illustration of a creation that was not yet finished. Right? It was like making Adam from the clay.
Using the original material.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And there was 2 steps to it, right? Can I'm sorry. I don't mean to steal your story.
No, it's awesome.
No, I don't mean to steal your story, because he says, "What do you see?" And he says, "I see men walking. I see men as trees walking." And then he healed him again, and then he says, "Now what do you see?" And he's like, "Oh, I see everything."
Yeah.
And the Orthodox story is that first he healed him spiritually. So he healed his spiritual eyes first. And so when he saw men as trees walking, he was actually seeing the spiritual reality.
Right.
And then he healed him again, and he came and then healed his physical eyes, and then he was able to see the physical world that we experience.
Right. And then there's another thing about veneration that I think is really pertinent, and it doesn't often get discussed when these questions come up. But in the Orthodox Church, there are no dead people. So, I've had a lot of non-Orthodox people talk to me about praying to the dead, talking to the dead, and it's like, well, wait a minute. Like, if you're a Christian, you're not dead, right? So there are no dead people. And so that's something to really keep in the back of your mind when considering what is happening with veneration, because veneration, and I've only been to 3 liturgies in my entire career as an Orthodox Christian, but when the liturgy begins, the priest senses the icons first, and then he turns to the congregation, and everybody turns to each other, and he walks through, and he venerates them, because they are all images of Christ, right? And the saints, the icons, everything in the church, those are the great cloud of witnesses that are described in Revelation. And the reason that's important is because maybe I'm getting above my pay grade here, but I do know these things because I've talked to my priest about them. So the book of Revelation is never read in the Orthodox Church in the liturgical calendar. It's not read. And the reason for that is because the divine liturgy is patterned after the divine liturgy in the book of Revelation. So you actually are in the book of Revelation when you're in the church. And so there's no reason to talk about it. You have to, it's so symbolic, right? The whole book is so symbolic that to lay it out propositionally would be a fool's errand. You have to enter into it. And that is what the divine liturgy is. It's patterned after the liturgy in the book of Revelation. And so there was a reason I said that now, and I can't remember what it was. But anyway, I had to get those things out because I think those are a little bit forgotten, and everybody gets caught up in the worship veneration distinction. And I think that there's much deeper symbolic meaning to all of that. So does that help, David?
Yes, it helps. It helps in perspective. I
have a
see
little add to
Revelation
it.
slightly different, but yeah, Jeremy, if you want to continue going, I think this is well. You guys are doing a good job laying it out.
Thank you. I'm going to share a picture.
Okay.
And it will help the way I understand veneration. It'll help explain. So young people might not do this anymore. I don't know. I'm old. But when I was young, yeah, when you saw a woman, you would kiss her hand, right? And this goes back. And if you go to other countries, like my father-in-law is Turkish, my wife's half Turkish. When you go to Turkey, if an old man is walking on the street, everybody who's passing by them kisses their hand. When and the kids will come running from across the street to come and kiss the hand of the elder. Okay. And it's respect. It's not, no one was worshiping my father-in-law, I can assure you. But they were showing respect to him because he was an elder in their community. And this was more common, this is the president venerating his wife, right? I mean, this is a president venerating President Bush's wife. This was very common not very long ago. The boomers pretty much killed it, unfortunately, I think. And I mean, although these guys are definitely, I don't know if they're boomers.
I went to a Middle Eastern church for a while, and so lots of kissing.
Yeah, exactly. Same in like Romania, that kind of thing, right? So it's this idea of showing respect to an elder, and it is very separate from worship because
and in synagogue, you might we'll have prayer books, and you'll kiss the prayer book to touch the Torah scroll as it's being ushered about, where it has and I've heard Father Stephen talk about this as like as an introduction of the image, the notion of images. You can even see them in synagogue, where the Torah scroll, the scrolls themselves have crowns on them, right? Like, and it has like a garment that's put on it, where it's yeah, there's some kind of veneration is occurring. And further within Judaism, if you are 9 men and you are lacking a minion, the Torah can stand in as a person. Right? It's
Yeah.
as though the word could be a person. Interesting. Anyway.
Yes, there's definitely some parallels. Right. So
Yeah, and you know what they say in Orthodoxy? They don't say that, if somebody is an iconographer, he doesn't paint them, he writes them.
Interesting.
Mm-hmm.
yeah.
Because in the beginning was the Word, okay, and the Word was a person, and that is exactly what an icon is. The icon is the person who is the Word. Meister Eckhart has an interesting quote, and I don't think I'm going to be able to say it properly, but it's something about every creature is the Word of God, right? And I just, because I like to be controversial, I want to drag paganism into this a little bit, because paganism often left gift offerings, right? Like there's I think it's in the Scandinavian countries, at least I know in Finland, there are these stones with these little cups that were carved out of them, and those cups were for leaving gifts to the gods, the spirits in the woods or whatever. And in Celtic Christianity, many people will go to holy places where there is a saint, venerate that saint, pray for healing, and then leave a rag on a tree or a gift at the well, So what I find really interesting is that as human beings, we have this innate religiousness to us, right? And all over the world, we perform very similar rituals when it comes to what we perceive as divine, right? The sacred. And somehow I think that also needs to be, and this is just my opinion, this has nothing to do with the church, but I think that has to be honored, right? That has to be incorporated in a way that is good and right. And I just lost my train of thought again. Man, I've got
No, it's good. It's good. I would like to bring it back to the bronze serpent. That's what I think William was making a reference to, because it's also called Nehushtan. The bronze serpent is turned into an idol. So God commands it to be made. It is made as an image that the people are supposed to look at. God gives the pattern, God gives all the things, but it's still able to become an idol. Yeah. Which is especially interesting because of Christ. Like, could a crucifix be a graven image? Like, could an icon be an idol? That's and in Jewish tradition, it says Moses dies in the land, but we have no reference to where Moses is buried. And the Jewish tradition is that Moses tells tells Joshua, I know these people. If they know where I'm buried, my bones are going to become an idol, and they're going to worship at my grave. So you tell them I'm out for smokes. You tell them I'm out for milk. Right? He just kind of leaves out, walks out, so that no one.
Well, here's another thing that's interesting, David. I believe, and correct me if I'm wrong, Jeremy, because you'll know this better than me, that in many older Orthodox churches, the philosophers, the pagan philosophers, they are
in the narthex without halos,
right?
Yeah.
Like they're given that honor, okay?
Yeah, honored, but not shown as.
And in Dante, who is it who accompanies Dante throughout the poem?
Virgil.
Virgil.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I still haven't finished Dante yet. Nate, if you're listening, we haven't finished Dante yet. There is a special place in hell for them. Okay, and that sounds really weird, but it's actually really beautiful.
Yeah,
It's a garden, right? For all of them. So, like, this is what I'm saying about honoring this pagan mess, right? Because it's like a precursor to the creation of the world, which is, according to Christianity, is in Christ, right? It's done in Christ, and everything is a precursor to that. So, yeah. I also have an actual story, personal story, of how a saint did something amazing, miraculous, and it has to do with this little corner. Would you like to hear it?
Of course.
I would. Shari, sorry, I'd like to hear Jeremy's response to the idea of that first. I really want to hear.
Yeah. I forgot that you asked him a question. I'm sorry.
Yeah. No.
I think there's just a distinction for us, there's a distinction between worship and veneration. And veneration is we're paying respect to people who we respect as our elders, who walked before us, who showed us the way and showed us what it looks like to walk in the love of Christ, and fully dedicated and fully selfless, like in a self-emptying way. And so the veneration is where you're kissing the hand, we kiss the icon. There's a couple of things I was going to mention. According to tradition, St. Luke was the first iconographer, and the first icon that he painted was of the Theotokos, holding infant Christ. And so it was a part of the tradition from the beginning. And then the other thing I was going to mention is that worship we see as, so veneration is we're paying respect, and we ask the saints for their prayers. We ask for them to pray for us because they are closer to the throne of God than we are. If you look at from a traditional point of view, right, we're like the farthest away. We've been thrown, if you look from the Dante point of view, we've been thrown down very far from the throne of God. The saints are closer to the throne of God than us. Yeah. So their prayers.
For that reason, Virgil can only guide him so far. Virgil gets he gets to purgatory and says, "Okay, you're on your own now."
Right. So we pray to the saints, and the other thing is that so in the world we're very distracted. We're easily distracted. We're distracted by tiredness, by hunger, by noises, by discomfort. All these things that are distracting, and that's why some monks go into the desert, is to avoid some of those distractions so that they can focus completely on prayer. Well, the benefit of asking a saint to pray for you is that a saint does not have any distractions. A saint can pray for you purely and with their full attention. And we already know they're favored of God. And so their prayers, we see their prayers as efficacious for us, and powerful that way. So we're not praying. I'm not worshiping the saints. I'm not. I'm asking for their prayers.
Can someone do that? Can someone? Is there something that someone could do for an icon like that is an offering that would be counted as idolatry?
Anything can become an idol, right? Like
yes,
anything, because it's a matter of attention and it's a matter of obsession
and intention,
right? and intention. Yeah, that's good. Yeah, that's a good point. I think it's definitely possible for saints or for Theotokos to become an idol for someone who is distracted, right? Like anything can become an idol for us.
Would you include, because growing up Catholic, some of my experience was we sometimes wanted Mary to protect us from Christ himself. And I would consider that to be a kind of idolatry. If we see Christ as merciless and needing his mom to kind of take care of it. You know what I mean? Like it kind of gets into,
The way we kind of look at it is more like the king is constrained by appearances, right? Like if you think of it an earthly kingdom, this is a poor example because Christ is Christ and he can do whatever he wants, right? Like he's beyond this. But the model that makes sense to me is that like the king is constrained by appearance, right? And which is why in chess the king can only move one piece at a time, right? One square at a time. The queen can move anywhere and she can direct her influence from afar. She's the one who's behind the scenes making things happen, and the king has appearances, right? So if you pray to Theotokos, she does have Christ's, she is close to Christ and is more, the prayer is she's more honorable than the cherubim and more glorious beyond compare than the seraphim, right? So she is the throne of God. She is the Ark of the Covenant. And so it's not, so I don't know of any prayers where we're asking her to protect us from Christ.
No.
So I do hear where you're coming from. I don't know of any prayers in our tradition that have that language.
I will find you an example and you tell me if it's heretical from the Catholic tradition. Shari, can you tell us in narrative the theology as it relates to this corner? You were saying there was a miracle,
the saint
answered a prayer.
Yeah, my story. Okay, so I feel like I can tell this freely because I got permission from the person who it directly came from, and Jonathan Demir featured it on one of our conversations. So I'll tell it. And I never told it because it was too personal and I just didn't know if, Nathan wanted everyone to know. So I'm sure most of you are familiar with the fact that I match made Nathan and Shelley Woods. Okay. And this is not something that I have done before. And it's not something I ever want to do again, just to make that really clear. And so how it happened was I had noticed some things, and I won't get into detail, but I just noticed some things that for me, intuitively speaking, I thought, that's interesting. Nathan doesn't usually show that much attention to somebody. So, and it was just on the Discord. Like it wasn't in real life, right? Like this is on the Discord, folks. So anyway, and then I'm upstairs in my house and I'm vacuuming, and it was so weird that I know exactly where I was standing when it happened in the room. And so I'm vacuuming and all of a sudden this voice says, "When are you going to tell Shelley what you've noticed about Nathan?" And I'm like, and I actually said the F word. I'm like, F that. I am not doing that. Right? Just like, no way. Because I thought, I don't even know these people. And, Nathan could be a serial rapist for all I know. I don't know, just like, no. And like, this is also my first foray into social media, into the world of the internet, like, So, and then there was like this, okay, I'll be back, right? Feeling to it. And then the next day, just out of the blue, doing something else, same question. And I'm like, oh my God, what is this? And it went on for a week. And then finally I was like, fine, I was actually really mad. And I'm being totally honest here, okay? Like I was really mad about it. I didn't want to do it. And so I DM'd Shelley and I just said, so have you ever talked to Nathan Woods? And she's like, no. Why should I? And I'm like, well, maybe it would be good. That's kind of what I did. I didn't actually say that I noticed anything, but I just kind of pointed her in that direction. And like their first conversation, because she got back to me afterwards, and their first conversation was just like amazing, right? So they get married, these two. And after their wedding, we had a phone call, like we had a FaceTime. And Nathan said, Shari, there's something I didn't tell you that you should know. I said, okay, tell me, what is it? He said, well, and of course I told them the story of the voice. Okay. So they knew that. And they also knew the day of. And Nathan said that day he went on a pilgrimage to an Orthodox church that had an icon of Saint, and you said her name earlier, Xenia? Is that how you say it?
Thanks, Anya. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
He went there because he was praying for a wife, and apparently she was the saint that it really helps with those things, okay? The day that I heard the question, when are you gonna tell Shelley what you've been noticing about Nathan? And it like, okay, so here's the weird thing, is it never felt like God to me. And I've had, nudges from God, like, maybe you should do this, or maybe you should, or ask God a question, and, the silence is the answer, but this didn't feel like God. And it had this feminine aspect to it where it was like, okay, fine, I'll be back. Something a woman would say, right?
That's really
It
great.
does seem a little bit bizarre that a virgin is organizing marriages, but yeah.
And it was
No, Saint Sandra wasn't a virgin. She was married, and her husband. She was young, and her husband was young. He was like 25, and he died. He was an alcoholic, and he died of a hangover. Got drunk, and died in his sleep. And she was so worried about his soul that she took his coat. He was a military officer. She took his coat and wore it for the rest of her life, and became a fool for Christ. And so she went.
She was a fool for Christ. Now I remember.
Sorry, Shari. I thought you were mentioning the Theotokos earlier in the story.
No, Saint Xenia.
Okay, only.
It was Saint Xenia that he went to.
Okay.
So anyway, he tells me this, and immediately I just got chills and goosebumps all over my body. I was like, oh my gosh, because I was the recipient of that voice. I heard that voice, and it was nagging me just like an old woman would, right? And it made me mad. And I was just, and it was the day of that he went.
Well, I never shared this story anywhere in the corner. But so I grew up Catholic, and I was an altar server, and a couple, their teenage daughter died in like a car accident or something, and they, in honor of their daughter, bought a statue of Mary that was on the outside of my church, and I was there for the dedication, and it was pouring rain as this couple is crying as the priest is blessing this statue. I think he was even trying to put holy water on it as it's like pouring rain. And we had these hoods that we never used. And it was so cold in the pouring rain that we like actually popped the hoods up. I remember that distinctly. And not long after that, I became an atheist, like grade 6, grade 7, like was very young as an atheist. And in grade 10, I saw the movie The Prince of Egypt, and the part where Moses takes his shoes off, like really, really struck me. And so I was walking home from work, and I felt like God was calling me. But where I said my first prayer that was Christ gathering me back to him, was in front of that statue. And so I was praying to God, but I knelt in front of the statue of Mary, and I took my shoes off as I approached, on that idea of holy ground in front of this statue. And I just cried out to God and said, I don't know who you are. I don't know if you exist. I don't know if you're male or female, or like what I just need you to know that I'm searching. It's basically like the first real prayer that I remember praying. And it was in front of a statue of Mary that I was there to dedicate once upon a time.
Beautiful.
Yeah, that is a beautiful story.
Yeah. Also, when you were,
I'm still not. I have my own version of. Here's my version of Pajot's Image of Everything. I made it into a carving so that you can see Christ is literally the highest point. If you look at it that way, he's the highest point in the carving, and so the holy dark. You know how Pajot talked about how the black that he's in is the symbol of the holy dark of God and the pre-existence and all that other stuff. It is actually it's hollow. It's carving like this bit is hollow, and it is actually, because it goes into the tree of life, it is also the lowest point in the image. So the highest point and the lowest point is where Christ is.
Wow.
Simultaneously. So look, when I'm talking about icons, I want to make sure that I didn't give Mary and John halos though. I gave the angel a halo at the bottom, but and the angels over here have halos, but I felt weird giving a halo to Mary and to John. Couldn't do it, guys.
The halo represents the light of Christ shining from them, right? Like they've united with Christ, and that's revealing that light, like a lamp that cannot be hid.
Yeah.
And another interesting point. I know. I understand.
It's not that I don't like it. It just
I know.
Yeah. There's like
all knowing is personal, right, David?
Yeah.
And one thing I was going to mention too is that the icons are seen two ways. One, well, they're seen many ways, but to simplify, I'll just say that they're seen as windows into heaven, which is why they don't, like in Orthodoxy, we don't use like realistic or naturalistic styling for the icons, right? They are that way for a reason, and it's to suggest a deeper reality and to invite you into it and to invite you into pondering that. But they're also not only seen as a window to heaven, but also as a mirror to a deeper part of yourself as well, right? So as you contemplate the icons, you're invited to contemplate you participate, like you in the icon, or you the icon revealing part of you back to you.
When before I was an Orthodox Christian, I got into a conversation with some people about idolatry, what idolatry is, and I used this example, and this is just something I cooked up in my head to help me understand. Like everything has to be a story for me. I just think in metaphors. So I could imagine, some ancient pagan in Scandinavia just being overwhelmed with the beauty of creation and the way that he's being cared for by it. The hunting is good, the fishing is good, the wife had a baby, she didn't die, the cow's full of milk, the grass is green. It's one of those days when you just want to give thanks, right? And so he picks up a stick and he carves the face of whatever it is that he thinks is looking after him. And he gives thanks, right? To me, that is an icon and not an idol. It is something with which he can remember himself to the sacred. The problem for me, it becomes idolatry when it replaces that larger, bigger thing that is greater than he is. He knows that the stick is not the thing. Okay. And so, like I actually heard Dov Elbaum talking in one of Zevi Slavin's conversations that he had from, I can't remember, I think is it the Hartman Institute in Israel, somewhere in Israel?
No, yeah.
Anyways, if you like you'd probably love those conversations, David. So that they're on Zevi Slavin's channel, and I think they're called the Hartman Institute playlist. And there's this guy, Dov Albaum, and he's I think he used to be like a TV personality in Israel or whatever. He was really curious about what this idolatry is. And he went to India, and he didn't just go to India because he was curious about idolatry. He had a love for and a curiosity about a lot of so-called idol worshiping religions. And I can't remember exactly how he phrased it, but he was in a Hindu temple and he was watching the way that people worshiped, and he didn't see them worshiping the idols. That's not what he saw, right? It was a kind of a veneration. And he said to Zevi, and I mean, this was a real dicey conversation. I actually mentioned it to Joseph, and he's like, I didn't like that guy. I was like, of course not. But he said to Zevi, you know, he could go in there and he could know the sacred and the divine in that place. He didn't worship there because he said, I'm not supposed to because I'm a Jew. But I could see what was happening there, and it wasn't idol worship, in his opinion. So that is a you know, conversation you should listen to, David. And that has nothing to do with the Orthodox Church, but
No,
I
understand.
made some really interesting observations in that conversation.
And I believe the Lord could receive worship in such a way. It's just that if I'm just going by the stories, you know, on Jacob's channel, I'm doing the Bible study, and we're getting into 1 Samuel right now, and there's a story where the altar where the Ark of the Covenant is brought in, and it's placed before the altar of Dagon, right? It's stolen by the Philistines, and when they come in the morning, the idol has toppled over, and it's broken, right? And I believe that the image of the Ark of the Covenant is God's throne. I believe that's what we're supposed to get from it. We have found images of such chairs that idols were put on, and so the image is the Dagon bowed before God's throne. I think is the image that we're supposed to get. It's also, by the way, that little bit that I'm saying right now is why I think the Orthodox are incorrect liturgically about Revelation, because I think Revelation is an image of the temple in Jerusalem as God received the design for, and that there is like Pajot talks about John making this change where an altar is brought in to the Holy of Holies. I completely disagree. Because there is an altar at the door of the Holy of Holies. It's the altar of incense. And also blood is presented on the throne itself. Like, I think there's some other stuff within there. I have a question. Do you guys, I know you call Easter Pesach, which is Pascha, which is Pesach is how you say Passover in Hebrew. Okay. So it's obviously connecting the two things. Do you still venerate in some form, celebrate Yom Kippur? Celebrate is the wrong term for Yom Kippur. You afflict your soul.
Observe, maybe.
Yeah. Do you observe Yom Kippur in any way in the fall? Would you know?
Well, remind me of the.
Yeah,
remind me of Yom Kippur.
So Yom Kippur is the days of awe. That's the Jewish New Year, which is the head of the year, Rosh Hashanah, or Feast of Trumpets. That's in the fall, and then Yom Kippur is quickly behind it, and then tabernacles or Sukkot. So if it would be
Yeah, but Yom Kippur, isn't that a day of repentance or something like that? I can't
yes,
remember.
repentance and
Day
the
of
Day of
Atonement.
Atonement. Yeah,
Day-
you
day-
afflict your soul as you turn towards God.
Yeah.
I don't know the details of the ceremonies related to Yom Kippur to be able to recognize it. I will tell you that our new year starts, like our liturgical year starts on September 1st. I don't know if that's related, but
It would be around that time.
yeah, our liturgical new year starts on September 1st.
And the Orthodox Pascha is after the Jewish Passover. Always.
Yeah, so it's the first Sunday after the first full moon after the spring equinox. So there was a debate early on as whether we should celebrate it on Pascha or if we should always celebrate it on Sunday. And the consensus was that we celebrate it, we use the same rule, but move it to the following Sunday because, all the symbolism tied to that as well. When you were telling your story, I'm going to go back a little bit, but this came into my mind and I have to share it with you.
I love it. I'm having a great conversation, by the way, guys. I hope that you're enjoying this as a conversation, and I'm not. I don't want to be fighting you because I disagree.
No.
Okay.
Yeah.
No, I don't get that
I don't
sense.
feel that way at all.
Okay.
So this is Moses.
The Transfiguration.
This is Moses. Yeah, before the burning bush.
It's Moses. Oh, that's right.
This is Moses. The burning bush. So he's taking off his shoes, and he's barefoot. So here he's climbing up. Here he takes off his shoes. Here his shoes are removed, praying before the burning bush. And so, the Orthodox belief is that
you believe that I instinctually, or not instinctually, that the Lord communicated to me through the burning bush that I was supposed to kneel before Mary because they're the same thing.
And take your shoes off. I mean,
she is the bush that burned but was not consumed.
Yes, because there was a lot in her that could have destroyed her.
Yeah, it said her womb there's an icon of her called more spacious than the heavens.
Mm-hmm.
Because her womb was more spacious than the heavens. That which could not be contained was contained.
Jeremy, that was awesome. I didn't even think of that. I knew that. I knew the icon, but it didn't even dawn on me when he was telling his story.
I had heard Pajot connect the two, and I didn't connect them. It's a funny thing because being around Protestants and they want to know how I came back to God, I just say, like I say that I knelt in front of my old church. I leave out a couple of details.
Yeah. Poor you. You can't tell the real story.
Yeah.
Well, there's an image for you to there's lots of versions of it. We've got one in our church. We've got a version of this icon in the narthex of our church.
Why do you think Mary is not present after chapter 1 of Acts? If she held this position, that
the tradition is to protect her and out of respect for her. Now I have a book. I have a 400-page book on the life of the Theotokos. That's been preserved in the monasteries. So it's there. It's just not in the scriptures. But we have a lot of accounts from her life.
Why would there be accounts of Christ's life, and that wouldn't be disrespectful, but it would be disrespectful to have her life? Well,
it's the Christ is God incarnate, and Theotokos, I think it's out of reverence for her and out of respect for her, but also there was all of the tension. I mean, they were hiding. Everyone was hiding right after the crucifixion, and I think there was a lot of effort and thought put into protecting Theotokos, right? And John was put in charge of that, and so I know she played a role, but I know that it's it's hard for us to relate to now, but it's also it's the respect of silence, right? It's just like it's the idea of not sharing too much that you become too familiar as well, right? It's like keeping her holy, keeping her mysterious, keeping her hidden is part of her power in the world.
So in Judaism, you welcome the Sabbath in, and the Sabbath is referred to as the queen. Like the Sabbath is queen. And in some of the language, the first conversation I ever had with Jacob, I was talking about Kabbalah and how they imagine the Sabbath coming into existence, and they use a sexual metaphor. And Jacob became uncomfortable in the middle of my conversation with him, and it wasn't that he disagreed with anything I was saying.
Right.
He just said, we do not talk about these things.
Right.
Because I had delved pretty deep into some things in Judaism where they're like, and some of these things are in Kabbalah as well, where it's like, this is as far as you're supposed to talk about these things publicly,
right?
Because we hit a private part, and then you're not supposed to talk about it.
Related to that, earlier you were asking if icons can become idols and whatever, and other things, can they become idols? And I agree that they can. There's definitely a potential for that. And I heard a monk say one time that in more advanced levels of prayer, you eventually find out that all of your ideas
We're all idols
and all of the images. Yes, they're all idols.
Yeah. That's I've heard that. Leave all your visions behind. Don't focus on them. They were trying to get at something.
It's only the encounter that's real.
Yeah.
Right. Truly real. Everything else is meant to point us. It's meant to train us. It's meant to heal our noose, is the way we see it. So your noose, the way that they structured your, like a person was your noose, and then your soul and your heart, and your noose is the organ that you use to apprehend God, right? And you train it by learning to apprehend beauty.
Yeah.
And the icons are also meant to heal your noose. So the world ruins your noose and clouds your noose and makes it so you can't perceive God.
Could it be translated as like I've heard it as mind? Could it be spirit?
Yeah, because mind is not really good, because that kind of implies that it's intellectual or that it's imagination,
right,
and it's neither of those. Noose is definitely like an apprehension of beauty, but it could be a spirit as well. Yeah, there's different ways of structuring it depending on who's writing and what the context is.
Well, and I'm just wondering because in Corinthians, when it speaks of the spirit communicating with our spirit, and then that connection. Would that be? I never learned Greek, guys. Would that be related to, like, because pneuma is nous related to pneuma?
No, nous is spelled N-O-U-S.
So it's not panous.
No.
Yeah.
And so it is tied to thought or reason, but it's also more like perception. Or so like your mind's eye. It's apprehension. It's like recognition. It's you could think of it as like participating in logos, right? If logos is the structure that organizes everything, your nous recognizes that.
Can I read something from Meister Eckhart that is directly related to what you guys are talking about here?
Yeah,
sure.
So he's talking about the soul. He's talking about images, and he's talking about how the soul understands the world, or how the soul comes to know things. So it says here, whatever the soul affects, she affects with her powers. And her powers are her senses. What she understands with the intellect. What she remembers, she does with memory. If she would love, she does that with the will. And thus she works with her powers and not with her essence. Every external act is linked with some means. The power of sight works only through the eyes. Otherwise, it can neither employ nor bestow vision, and so it is with all the other senses. The soul's every external act is effected by some means, but in the soul's essence there is no activity. For the powers she works with emanate from the ground of being. Yet in that ground is the silent middle, here nothing but rest and celebration for this birth, this act, that God the Father may speak his word there. So he's talking about where Christ is born in us, and it's this essence of the soul. It's this place of no images. I talked about this this sermon before. I've read the sermon on the channel. But then he goes on to say, no one can touch the ground of the soul but God alone. No creature can enter the soul's ground, but must stop outside in the powers. Within, the soul sees clearly the image whereby the creature has been drawn in and taken lodging. And whenever the powers of the soul make contact with a creature, they set to work and make an image and likeness of the creature, which they absorb. That is how they know the creature. No creature can come closer to the soul than this, and the soul never approaches a creature without having first voluntarily taken an image of it into herself. Through this presented image, the soul approaches creatures, an image being something that the soul makes of external objects with her own powers. Whether it is a stone, a horse, a man, or anything else that she wants to know, she gets out the image of it that she has already taken in, and thus is enabled to unite herself with it. So this is how Meister Eckhart, so this is the external part of the soul, and this is how she unites herself with the world around. But in her essence, there is a place of no images, and that is where God is. And I just thought it was such an interesting way to look at that whole commandment, right? There will be no likenesses and no images, where God is born in us, right? So let me just see if I can find one more thing to read here, The highest seraph has a single image. He seizes as a unity all that his inferiors regard as manifold, but God needs no image and has no image. Without any means, likeness, or image, God operates in the soul, right in the ground where no image ever got in, but only he himself with his own being. This no creature can do, because a creature is an image, which is like playing on the whole idea of Adam naming the animals and everything else, right?
Yeah, so this is fascinating. Is Christ the image of the invisible God before he was incarnate? Before he took on flesh, because in Paul's letter, where is it? Is it Philippians? He is the image of the invisible God, the firstborn of all creation. Is he the image of the invisible God before he take? Well, I know the answer because in the Orthodox tradition,
you're talking about the infinite in terms of the finite.
But in the Orthodox tradition, it's Christ, the man, who creates Adam. So the image of Christ, of God breathing into Adam's nostrils, it is not the Father, which is depicted in the icons. It is the Logos.
Right.
It is the Son.
But where does that happen? Remember the lamb slain before the foundations of the world?
Right.
So it's today, and it's happening right now. Right.
It's happening all the time.
Because it's outside of time and space.
Right? Well,
so all this stuff
it's
wraps
not just
around
that. Before the New Testament was ever written, within Jewish thought, they start having this idea of how could an infinite God interact with the world. And they speak of there needing to be my cats are very upset with me. They need, like, the infinite needs to, if you will, kill some aspect of himself in order to interact with humanity.
Yeah, so he has to condescend. Yeah,
he has to condescend. And so within some Jewish thought, they speak of an aspect of God which would be able to interact with the world. that there would be, which as Christians we just go, yeah, that's the Son. We got a name for that too, right? And in some traditions that even would be the Word, right? Because God creates.
Exactly.
Within Judaism, they say, well, God creates the Word, and so Hebrew scholars will have this weird stuff about, well, he first makes the Hebrew alphabet, because in order to create, he creates through the Word. And so it's the Word is the first thing that must exist within God in order for creation to occur. So in the Targums, the Aramaic translation, instead of using the divine name, because they didn't want to write it out, they would supplement, especially in the burning bush narrative, they would supplement it with memra, which means the word of God. Like it would be his memra, his word, is what you interact with, not just him directly.
Right. And in Orthodoxy, like we see in Jeremiah, when it says the word of the Lord came to Jeremiah, we believe Christ is coming and speaking to Jeremiah.
Beginning of Samuel, it says, you saw the word.
Yes.
He has a vision of the word of God. It's just like, why do you see? And it specifically says in those days, a prophet was called a seer. And the corrupt guy is blind, right? Eli is having problems with his vision. So you can see it all coming together where
that's what John is doing in the book of John, in the Gospel of John. He's playing with creation and that language and Christ. He's developing that early Christology that Christians had, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think a lot of Christians, especially Eastern Orthodox, will say, oh, it's logos, which is this logos stuff within philosophy. And I agree with that. But it's also this memra and word stuff. Like when God's presence is in the temple, he says that the temple is the place where his name dwells. Right? What does it mean his name dwells there? It means God's it means God lives there. But it doesn't say God, it says his name. So there's this word, this name, this image that's God physically manifest in the world.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, I just want to make one thing clear, though, here. This is not like an Orthodox catechism class or anything.
Yeah, no.
Like, we're not trying to recruit people.
It might have to be Orthodox apologetics, because, like I said,
you know what? I'll just refuse to go there. Honestly, I just really want to do the lives of the saints.
No. I think this is great.
Yeah.
I was on Chad's channel before, so I didn't catch the beginning. So I'm going to start from the beginning and go through what you guys went through.
Oh, is Chad live streaming right now?
No, he was. About an hour into it, he noticed you guys were, and he just went, "Okay, we're gonna stop now."
Oh, sorry. You know what? I don't have any clue what people are up to. So
no. He did it randomly, and you guys scheduled it. It's completely fine. He was happy. He was actually in the comments for a little bit as well.
Oh, I didn't see that.
None took offense.
Okay.
It was the way that the conversation needed to move. At some point, I'm going to do some presentations on Yom Kippur, and I'd like, I like to say that the Jewish folks on Jacob's channel, because I'm a Christian using it, they keep me honest. So I want to make sure that I'm representing their traditions well, but I would love to hear from an Orthodox response whether or not you feel that your liturgy fits well into Yom Kippur, which is how I understand the book of Revelation.
So is this the goat and the sheep, and the goat is sent into the wilderness as an offering to Azazel?
Yes, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
I just want to make sure, and with the scarlet thread on his tail.
Yeah, so if you look at an image of the bronze altar that was outside, the remains of the animal would fall up, it's like a grill, okay? It's got the horns, it's got this, but you have animals burning, and then their remains and the coals, the ashes would fall below the altar. Okay. So you could see the remnants, and the priests are in white garments. There's one guy who also has golden crown with God's name on it, right? Holy to the Lord is written on his forehead. In the book of Revelation, when there's an altar, and he says, I could see the remains of the saints who gave their lives under the altar.
Yeah.
Under the altar is because he is looking into heaven and he sees the tabernacle. He sees the temple. He sees the practicing of God's temple, like is the temple of God is in
liturgy.
use, and the clergy, the sacrifice, the remnant. It's then they get up and they're given white robes, so they go from being the sacrifice to being the priests, right? So that's why they're in white robes. It's not like, I just grew up with, no, it's like they are priests of our God, right? They are, and Christ connects the sacrifice and the priest into one role. And also the name written on their forehead, right? The golden crown like I see all these as images which are related to each other. So I think if you walk through the traditions of Yom Kippur, that is the book of Revelation. And the first thing that the high priest did is he tends the candles, the menorah, the candelabra, not candles. Sorry, it looks like a candelabra, but it's not. It's oil. And that's the beginning of the book of Revelation. Is he's tending the lampstands and say and what he would be doing is cleaning out the gunk, putting in new oil, and not just that, the old priestly garments when they were finished, they would take those garments and rip them up, and that would be the wicks. So the wicks were literally made of the priest's garments. And that's how Christ appears at the beginning. That's the golden sash. It's the golden outfit that the high priest wore, right?
Well, and that image you mentioned about the saints being under the altar, every Orthodox altar has relics of a saint in the altar. That's what makes it an altar.
Right.
There's a relic of a saint in the altar when it's dedicated. So
do you guys do little brown pieces of cloth? That was like a thing. No, you don't know what I'm talking about. Sorry. There's a couple of very specific Catholic things.
Not that I know of, no.
Guys, this was wonderful. I'm gonna head out. Thank you.
It's been a real pleasure. Thanks for stopping in.
Thanks for jumping on, David.
Thanks, guys.
By the way, real quick before you go, I wanted to show you. So you mentioned the scarlet thread, and you were asking about it. And there is a tradition that when the angel Gabriel appeared to Theotokos and I'm pulling up an icon here, and that's not a good example. All right, hold on, sorry. I'm trying to be quick because I know you got to go. Here we go. So when angel Gabriel, I'll share my screen. Share screen. Thank you. This one here. Thank you. Okay. So angel Gabriel appeared to Theotokos. She was actually weaving the veil for the temple, because at that time, like the virgins who lived in the temple that's what they did. They would make the new veil for the temple because it would wear out. So that's what they worked on. She was working on the veil of the temple when Gabriel appeared to her, and she's holding that. You can't see it very well, but she's holding that red. Let me open a new tab. I'll show you a better one. She's holding that red, that scarlet thread. She was making the veil that was the same veil that was in the temple when Christ was crucified, and it ripped from top to bottom. Theotokos was the one who was building that, and it became an image and a symbol of Christ forming in her womb. Like that veil was an image of that, and that's why she's holding this, and it's in the shape of a cross, and it's already hinting, even when it's just being announced that she's pregnant. It's the icon is already hinting at the end of the story. and there's this area is kind of highlighted, and it shows where Christ will sit on her lap as the throne. She's the throne of God, and Christ will sit on her lap. She's also the Ark of the Covenant, so the mercy seat, and then also that will be the place where she holds him after he's died. And so that cross is pointing at that. All of that imagery is built into that one icon. So just looking at the scarlet thread, like studying how the scarlet thread appears all through the Old Testament and then kind of finalizes in this image.
Do you know about the miracle that's in the miracle regarding the scarlet thread in the Talmud? Do you know about this?
No.
Okay, I have to tell you this because it's
I know you had to leave. I'm sorry.
I know. It's just.
I'm sorry.
It's my favorite thing. It's my favorite thing in the world. So, okay, you cast lots for the two goats, one for Adonai, one for Azazel, right? Mm-hmm. How do you remember which one you cast for which? Well, easy. You take a scarlet cord and you tie it to the horn of Azazel, and that's how you know who it is, right? And it's supposed to be that it's taking the sin away, right? Mm-hmm. So it goes into the desert, but what if that thing came back, right? Does that mean all your sin came back? So the tradition that is in the Talmud is that you set the goat free on the edge of a cliff. You're free, right? It's not coming. It's not going to come back, right? Because the desert killed it. But in Jewish tradition, the red cord turned white, and that was God receiving receiving atonement, like that atonement was created, was provided. And then they would take that white cord, and I believe there's a tradition where it's put on the door of the temple, so people walking by would be like, "That is the evidence that that we're in a state of atonement with God." If you look in the Talmud, it says 40 years before the temple was destroyed, that cord stopped coming back red
or white.
Oh yeah, so yeah, it stopped coming back white.
Yeah.
40 years before the destruction of the temple. You guys know when the temple was destroyed?
AD 70.
40 years after Jesus died.
Right.
40 years after Jesus died is when the temple is destroyed. And it says, not in Christian tradition, in the Talmud, that the sign that this is how atonement is done wasn't coming from there anymore.
Wow.
Yeah, there's more stuff, but guys, thank you. Thank you for humoring
Thank
me.
you. I didn't mean to hold you longer than you wanted.
This is great. I love nerding out with you, David. It's great.
Yeah. This was lots of fun. Okay.
Thanks a lot.
I'll watch the beginning of this as I feed my cats. Goodbye.
Okay, sounds good.
Thanks a lot.
Bye. Well, I think we could wrap it up here.
Yeah, we've had a good run.
I think it was good.
Yeah.
It was interesting to me. It's the more we go on here, the more questions I'll be able to generate, which is what I like to do.
I think we've solved the problem of what's causing your internet problems. Your internet's great. There's nothing wrong at all.
Well, it's also cooled off now. Like what time is it? I don't know what time it is. I don't have my
8 o'clock.
8 o'clock.
Yeah.
Yeah, the sun's down. And it was like, I don't know what it is in Fahrenheit, but it was like 32 degrees Celsius today.
Woo.
And it does a lot of wind when it's like that. And then and we're just getting a cell tower signal. So I find my internet signal is the most consistent in the wintertime when it's like really cold weather. And it's just like no clouds, and because we got line of sight to a cell tower, right? So
I see. Yeah.
And I just think with all the thermals and I think it's, bending space and time
Yeah.
or
I thought it
something.
was just your husband taking the internet most of the time.
Well, it doesn't help when it's weak and then he's on the internet and I'm on the
Right,
internet.
right,
That's
right,
not great.
No. Well, thanks again for this honor. It's an honor to be able to just share the lives of the saints with people who haven't been exposed. I think it's
Yeah.
going to be really great. I'm also going to like pull occasionally, like I have books or accounts of more modern saints as well, and I'm going to pull some images, some stories from those, just so we can have a wide variety, and like I said, you'll start to see patterns as well, which is really beautiful.
Right. And I would like to maybe dig up some stories of some Celtic saints.
Oh yeah.
Because Paul Kingsnorth has been doing a whole series on, lives of the saints in Ireland and in the UK too, I think. And I also have a friend who was thinking about becoming an Orthodox nun, and she went to Mull Monastery to look into it, and she just had a real love for the Celtic saints.
Mhm.
And she introduced me to some really interesting Celtic saints.
That would be great.
So I think that's a fun area to look into too, because they're different than like the Greek saints and a lot of them are well-known European ones.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, that'd be great.
Yeah, it'll
Love
be
it.
fun. Yeah, cool. All right. Well, thank you, everybody. And just hang in there for a minute, Jeremy. I'll end the stream.
Okay.
Have a good night,
Good night.
everyone.
God bless.